The installation had been dead for 9,000 years. That was the Survey Division's official assessment. I had read it 3 times on the descent shuttle. And I had believed it, because the data was clean. No power signature, no thermal variance, no biometric returns. The atmospheric scanner registered trace elements consistent with composite construction, the dense, dark alloy the ancient humans had favored on their outer installations, but nothing active. The structure sat on the plateau like a stone left by a retreating tide, enormous, inert, perfectly, boringly dead. I was the senior operative on this survey. I had 22 years in the division and 11 planetary assessments behind me, and not one of them had produced a live asset. The continuance's records were clear. Humanity's pre-compact installations were cultural relics at most. We cataloged them. We photographed the stonework. We submitted reports that used words like archaeological significance and non-operational and suitable for academic designation. We did not prepare for contact protocols, because there was nothing to contact. I stepped through the threshold at 0814 local. The gate registered me in 0.3 seconds. I did not know that at the time. The instrument in my left hand showed nothing, the same flat baseline it had shown on approach, the same nothing it had shown for the entire descent. The gate did not announce itself. It did not pulse or hum or shift the light. Whatever it did below the resolution of anything we had brought. What I know now. What the installation's own log showed us, later, when we were permitted to read it, is that in the near 0.3 seconds after I crossed the threshold, the gate had recorded the biometric signatures of all 6 members of my team, cross-referenced our species designation against a classification index that had last been updated 9,240 years ago, and logged us under a category that translated, approximately, as Visitor Class, Non-Allied, Non-Hostile, Monitoring Recommended. It had been doing this, the log also showed, for every visitor in the intervening 9 millennia. It had logged 47 previous survey teams. It had logged a continuance census ship that passed within orbital range in the year 7003 of the Standard Reckoning, and never even landed. It had logged a Velthari prospecting crew that broke a surface panel in year 4882, trying to determine what the composite was made of. The category for the Velthari crew was different. It translated as Visitor Class, Non-Allied, Assessed Hostile, Structural Integrity Response Initiated. Prospecting ship had been found adrift 3 days later, engines intact, crew intact, deeply confused, with no memory of the 6 hours they had spent on the plateau. We did not know any of this when Operative Durath knelt at the central pillar and began running a standard interface sequence. "Nothing here," he said. "The surface reads passive." "Keep going," I said. He ran the sequence. Pillar did not respond to his instruments. It did not need to. His instruments were not what it was listening to. At 0831, Operative Senth Khan moved to the inner ring and touched one of the carved panels. She was not trying to activate anything. She was measuring the depth of the engraving. The panel was warm under her palm. She pulled her hand back and looked at me. "Thermal return," she said. "Lyclos, just this panel." We recalibrated the scanner. The panel read cold. The scanner was not, as it turned out, measuring the right thing. At 0847, our communication relay chirped. The relay was keyed to the division's standard frequency, encrypted with a rotating cipher that changed every 6 hours. The chirp was not our division. The chirp was the installation, which had apparently spent the last 33 minutes quietly observing us before deciding to introduce itself through the one channel we had left. The message was 6 seconds of audio. It was in Old Varek trade tongue, the pidgin dialect that the continuance had used as a diplomatic lingua franca roughly 10,000 years ago and had largely abandoned 4,000 years after that. My translation implant needed 3 seconds to locate the right register. It said, "You have been logged. Your team's classification is Visitor Class, Non-Allied. The monitoring period is ongoing. Please do not damage the stonework." Dareth stood up very slowly. "Did the installation just?" "Yes," I said. "But the power readings, I know. I ran the full spectrum scan myself. I set the instrument to its widest aperture, held it at chest height, and turned a slow circle. The baseline held flat, no electromagnetic gradient, no acoustic resonance. No thermal differential beyond the single warm panel, which was already reading cold again, as if it had decided to stop showing us even that much. Whatever the installation was running on, it was not anything we had a receiver for. I looked at Senth Khan. She was already recalibrating her own instrument, jaw set, working through the sensor array with the methodical attention of someone who does not accept a null result on principle. She would not find anything. I could already see that she would not find anything, and that when she finished, she would lower the instrument and not say a word, because there was nothing useful to say. Expand the survey perimeter, I said. I want a ground penetration reading on the installation's footprint. If there's a power source, it's underground. Operatives Tarvin and Voss moved to the outer edge and began the sequence. The ground penetration scan took 11 minutes. It returned a perfect, unbroken image of solid bedrock 40 meters down and nothing else. No cavity, conduit, no buried component of any kind. The installation was running on nothing we could find. I stood very still and looked at the central pillar, which looked back at me the way a mountain looks at you. Without eyes, without expression, with the specific indifference of something that has been here far longer than you, and expects to be here far longer still. I keyed my relay. Division Command. This is Senior Operative Charon. We have an active asset at grid reference Plateau 7. I am requesting a full contact protocol team and a xenolinguistic specialist. Classification, live installation, pre-compact human construction, confirmed operational, please expedite. There was a pause on the line, then Command said, say again, Charon. Live, I said. The installation is live. Another pause. Charon, the assessment file. The assessment file is wrong, I said. Please expedite. We held position. I did not touch anything. I did not permit my team to touch anything. The installation continued to do whatever it was doing at whatever resolution it had chosen to operate on, and we stood in its interior and waited, and the thin wind moved over the plateau, and the composite walls did not creak. At 912, the inner door opened. It was not a dramatic opening. It did not grind or thunder. It moved the way a well-maintained door moves when someone who knows where the handle is opens it from the other side. Smooth, unhurried, the kind of motion that implies routine. The seams had been invisible until that moment. The door was 3 meters high and had blended so perfectly into the wall that none of us had identified it as a door. The woman who came through it was carrying a broom. She was human. I had seen humans before. The continuance's records maintained physical catalogs of known species, but I had not seen one in person, and I was not prepared for how ordinary she looked. She was perhaps 60 years old by human reckoning. She wore a worn gray work tunic and trousers with deep pockets. Hair was silver white and pulled back loosely. She had the look of someone who had been interrupted in the middle of a task and was mildly but not significantly inconvenienced by it. She looked at the 6 of us standing in her installation. She looked at the instruments in our hands. She looked at the section of carved panel that Senth Khan had touched, where one of the characters in the third line of the inscription had been slightly smudged. She said something in standard compact, which my implant caught without difficulty. That inscription took 11 months to cut, she said. Please don't lean on it. Senth Khan took a step back. She did not say anything. None of us said anything. The human woman rested the broom handle against the wall and crossed her arms and regarded us with the expression I would later come to understand was the human default when they were being patient with something they could very easily stop being patient with. Not threatening, not hostile. The assessment had logged us as non-hostile, and she was extending us the same classification in return, which I found, in that moment, more unnerving than a weapon would have been. Operative Karen, she said, reading my name directly, not from a badge, not from a document I had presented. From the log which she had access to, which had been accumulating since 0814, which had my full division identification embedded in my relay signature. You've contacted your command structure. That's good. That's the right call. I stopped. You have access to the log. I have access to everything in the installation, she said. That's what I'm here for. How long have you been inside? She considered this as if the question were slightly imprecise, which perhaps it was. My family has maintained this installation for 4 generations, she said. My grandmother's grandmother took the posting. Before that, it was a different family line. The installation has had continuous custodial coverage for. She glanced at the central pillar, which I now understood was not a pillar. 9,241 years. Give or take the rounding in the standard calendar. I looked at the central pillar. I looked at the woman. I looked at the door she had come through, which had closed again seamlessly behind her. The power signature, I said. We scanned this installation from orbit. From the surface, nothing registered. The installation doesn't broadcast, she said. It listens. Those are different things. Our instruments. Your instruments measure what you taught them to measure. She was not unkind about it. She was factual in the way that a person is factual when they have explained something many times to many different visitors and have long since stopped being surprised by the need to explain it. The installation operates on a different set of parameters. It has been operating on those parameters for longer than your census records go back. It was not built by people who expected their equipment to be understood by whoever came along next. Behind me, I heard Darath make a very small sound. What was it built for? I asked. She looked at me for a moment. It was not a searching look. She was not deciding whether to trust me. She had already decided. The installation had already decided on her behalf, 47 visits ago, that the appropriate posture was watchful openness. She was simply giving the question the weight it deserved before she answered it. To watch, she said. To remember. To be here when whoever built it came back, or when whoever found it needed to understand something about who built it. She paused. It keeps records. Every species that has walked through that threshold, every scan that was run, every language that was spoken in the outer ring, it's all in the log. All of it. 9,000 years of it. My grandmother called it the longest letter anyone ever wrote. She looked at the central pillar the way you look at something you have looked at every day of your life and still find remarkable. She wasn't wrong. She picked up the thread again, and to make sure nobody damaged the stonework in the interim. I thought about the Velthari prospecting crew in year 4882. I thought about the 6 hours of missing memory in the ship found adrift. I thought about the warm panel under Senth Kane's palm and the installation that had registered us before we had registered it. The crew in 4882 said, the prospecting survey. They broke a surface panel, she spedla. The installation responded proportionally. They had no memory of 6 hours. They were not harmed, she said. They were processed and released. The panel was repaired. She glanced at the smudged inscription. Some damage is easier to repair than others. The silence on the plateau was the kind of silence that happens when a large group of people are all very carefully not looking at their instrument because their instruments are not going to help them and they know it. I keyed my relay again. Division command, stand down on the contact protocol team. We have a designated custodian on site. Situation is stable. I will submit a full assessment on return. Commands after a pause. Karan, what is the classification? I looked at the woman with the broom. I looked at the central pillar, which had logged us in 0.3 seconds, and had been running without interruption for 9,000 years on power sources we could not detect, with instrumentation we could not read, tended by a family line that had not missed a generation in 400 years. Compact human installation, I said. Class 17 designation. Operational status, continuously active. Recommended classification. I stopped. The woman raised an eyebrow. Take your time, she said. I thought about the words. I thought about what my report would look like sitting in the division's filing system, alongside 46 previous survey reports, all of which had logged this installation as dead, inert, non-operational, of archaeological significance only. I thought about the category in the installation's own log. Monitoring recommended. And I thought about what it meant that the installation had been recommending that to itself, about us, the entire duration of our species' recorded history. Active, I said, and aware. The woman nodded once, the way you nod when someone has said the obvious thing, and you are not going to make a production of it. I need to finish sweeping, she said. The inner chamber collects a great deal of dust. You're welcome to wait in the outer ring, but please don't touch the inscriptions. Please don't lean on the pillar. She picked up her broom. It's not a pillar. She went back through the door, which opened for her and closed behind her without sound. I stood in the outer ring of an installation that had been listening to the galaxy for 9,000 years, with 5 operatives who were all holding instruments that had completely failed to detect it, and I wrote the first line of my report in my head. The installation was not dead. It had never used the word